My name's Adele Onyango, and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Welcome to this very special episode of Legally Clueless, because I am about to take you smack into our first live event of 2025. I'm really excited about it, but before we get into it, welcome to the family if this is your first time listening. Audio episodes like this go out every single Monday. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube because there is tons of action happening over there from our video series and even this live event. And last but not least, make sure you sign up to officially join the family on our website so that you can receive weekly letters from me. If you're an OG member, I appreciate you and I love you, and I am so glad that you are part of this family. So back to this live event, we decided to celebrate International Women's Day, insert applause here, by teaming up with WomenLift Health and bringing our favorite African women into our live space and have incredible panelists to help us have a conversation, real, raw, personal conversation on feminism in the African context. I loved this conversation because I felt so seen. I felt like the evolution of my feminism is accepted. I felt like I was not alone. I gained so many insights, and more than anything, it brought feminism closer to home. I feel like sometimes when we have these conversations, not only can they be polarizing, where it's like men versus women, which is not what it's meant to be, but also it can feel so far removed. Like I can't be me, just the individual. When we're having a conversation of feminism, I can't figure out what feminism means for me. So we're about to get into the conversation. First, I'm going to tell you about the speakers. And then I have a couple of questions, not too many. I'm not taking you to class though. A couple of questions that I would love you to answer in the comments, or you can DM us on Instagram. Maybe I should start with the questions first. Yeah. Let's do that, right? First question, are you a feminist? There is no right or wrong answer. We are just having a real conversation in a safe space. Feel free to say no. Feel free to say, I'm not sure. Feel free to say, hell yeah. Feel free to say, I haven't thought about it. That's the first question. Second question came up while we're having the conversations with one of the panelists who's my friend and incredible media personality here in Kenya, Janet Mbugua. She has 2 sons that she's raising, and I don't have kids, so I haven't really given this much thought because that's not my lived reality, but maybe it's yours. So to all the parents of boys listening, do you have conversations about women's rights and gender roles with your sons? And how do those conversations go? This one, I'm just curious to know, okay? Question number 3, are there spaces where you are scared to say that you're a feminist? It could be a physical space. It could be a virtual platform. For example, X has so much violence. I wouldn't be shocked that there are very many people who are scared to say they're feminists on that platform. So anyway, eager to hear your answers. Last question. Do you think feminism is un-African? So as you're answering this, please remember that there is no right or wrong answer. This is always a safe space, first and foremost, but especially to celebrate International Women's Day, let's just be real with each other. So drop your comments. I want to hear your answers to those questions. And as you're doing that, let's jump into the live event. So I brought together some amazing women to have a conversation about feminism in the African context. So I was joined by Dr. Norah Obudho, who's the East Africa Director for WomenLift Health. And she is one of my favorite people. Every time I listen to Dr. Norah speak, man, I walk away expanded, and Her career spans over 15 years, and she has worked in various teams, designing, managing, and even leading the teams in public health programs, across the divide from HIV to sexual reproductive health and so much more. Then we have Evelyne Opondo, who is the director for International Center for Research on Women Africa. Again, this was my first time meeting Evelyne actually, but boy, did she give me insights. I can't wait for you to hear more about her. And as I mentioned earlier, the third speaker during our live event was Janet Mbugua, who is a friend, honestly, like a very close friend. And I'm so happy in a vicious industry like media, I can say I have a good friend in her. And she is a TV host. She is the founder of Inua Dada Foundation, currently on the Fix the Nation show on Nation TV right here in Kenya. And so she came through. And then in the audience, we had such a wonderful, I can't wait for you to hear the audience share their thoughts. We had different influencers and women in media, women in health. So people like Dushi Kuria, who are one of my favorite people, Aniko, who is a PR guru right here in Kenya, Pinky Galani, and just so many insights came from the audience as well. Oh, before we go in, we got a couple of the Legally Clueless family to come to our studio and share their thoughts on feminism. So in our weekly newsletter, I literally just said, hey, do you want to be on the show? And we got quite a few people share that they wanted to come. They came to the studio, had very honest opinions on feminism in the African context. And so we're going to listen to that first and then go into the live event. Are you ready? Oh my God, very excited to share this with you.
Feminism is the belief and action towards ensuring that women have equal opportunities in society as men, irrespective of the field.
The fight for equal rights between both genders. Feminism to me is championing women's rights and giving them a space to be able to express themselves in the most authentic way possible without being confined with societal pressures and standards.
I don't consider myself a feminist because I do not have a full understanding of what feminism is about, the concept, the origination. What is it? How come it's just something that has come in the recent past? So I can't say I am something that I really don't understand. I'm a fishmonger because I understand what tilapia is in the business, but I'm not a feminist because I don't know what that is.
I met a lawyer from FIDA, and she was like, I'm a feminist. And I thought to myself, wait a minute. The definition at the time to me was like, feminists are women who don't want other women to be in marriage, to be conformed to those, normal societal standards, like a proper wife, a stay-at-home mom. So I thought to myself, this one must be a woman who does not love herself. She doesn't want to be married. She doesn't want to have kids. Only to realize I was so wrong about the interpretation.
The first time I ever heard about feminism was actually in church, and the pastor was saying it's not from God. So why they were not very pro this feminism thing, I really don't understand. Maybe it's because it was a male pastor.
Another sad thing is it's both male and female. If it was male, I'd say they don't understand it because of how the society, African society is. But the sad thing about women is that they think feminism is women wanting to be like men, which will not happen at any point. And for men, they think it's women refusing to take their place in society, which I also think is absurd because there's really no place for a specific gender, according to me.
Where do we categorize our roles in the new era? Because then now we can't just say women are meant to be in the kitchen and women are meant to take care of kids. And right now we have very many single men and they're doing it very, like single fathers, and they're doing it very, very well, maybe more even better than women, who knows?
The biggest misconception is people thinking that when you're championing for women agenda is you want to put women in a box. And this box is, you want women who are independent, you want women who, and for most people, the understanding of an independent woman is a woman who doesn't want to be with a man, which is very wrong, because you can be in a marriage, you can be in a relationship, but you can also be independent, self-sufficient as a woman, because you need to be you before you can be we.
Unfortunately, people don't even understand what it is. Like, we have the information, but people don't like someone will describe feminism and you're like, I think you're describing misandry. I don't think that's feminism.
Feminism doesn't have to put any woman in a small box. You can be married, but you're a feminist. You can be a single mother, but you're a feminist, because really it's championing for women's space to be able to get in any field they want to be able to get in any space really that they want to. I look at women like, for example, Martha Karua. I look at women like Millie Odambo. She's married and she's a whole feminist and she's doing good at it. So really, we need to stop putting women in a box, in a nutshell.
So let's start with you, Norah. What does feminism mean to you?
For me, feminism really is a process. And it's a continuous one. It doesn't stop, because it's all about dismantling anything that's limiting a woman or a marginalized population. So it's that limitation, and it has to be continuous, because if you stop, it will be chipped on, it will be destroyed, you cannot move forward. So really, it's just dismantling the limitations we put on women and other marginalized populations from achieving their greatest potential.
I really like that in terms of dismantling and having it ongoing, because I have caught myself, because of growing up in a patriarchal society, thinking something that's limiting, even for myself, and being like, where's that thought from, you know? So you have to continuously be checking, even on a personal level. And I love that. Evelyne, what is feminism to you?
Feminism to me is about our collective efforts, looking at this, the systemic structures that make it difficult for us to achieve a level of equality, equal opportunities, equal rights, and respect. And so feminism isn't just about women. Men could be feminists if they are also about a fair playing field, which a number of men really are about. So this myth that feminists are these women who hate men, who, that's just a myth.
Yeah, I think that came out in the video. And being in media, you must have been told that when you champion women's rights, it's like, you just hate men. It's like, where did I say that? What is feminism for you, and has being in media changed that definition over time?
I think so. It's great to be here, first of all. I almost want to say it's like a cross between the two, because I have found myself in an era of self-auditing and self-checking. I don't know whether it's too much. Sometimes I go down a rabbit hole. I'm like, catch yourself so that you don't get lost. But that's also with regards to feminism, because I've always believed, maybe initially I believed it was about equality for women and girls to have the same access and opportunities, which I think is great. Over time, I hold strong to the belief that it's about everybody having access, but understanding that there's still a huge majority and chunk of women and girls who still need to be lifted alongside. And then raising sons, when I'm trying to talk to them about what they see around them and how they stand up for people, I try to say to them, it's about everyone having access. It's about everyone still having the opportunity. So if they'll say, oh my gosh, that's a woman rally driver on TV, I'll say, yeah, because anyone can be a rally driver. If my son, my younger one, likes to dance and he's like, is dance for boys or is it for girls? Because in school, a lot of the girls dance. I say, no, it's for everyone. And so I think raising them is giving me a new definition. And I think it's a truth. It's everyone should, if they want to, and not really have to face any barriers. So that's kind of where I'm straddling what feminism is to me. And it feels true.
I like what Norah said. It's like an ongoing process. So it will evolve. Yeah. And I like that there's a different element in terms of motherhood and raising specifically boys. When you almost want to say the F word when you are talking about feminism, not the other one. F for feminism, right? And the reason sometimes it can even get scary to in a room say, I'm a feminist, or online say I'm a feminist, is because it's polarizing. That's just the truth. Whether it's polarizing because of misunderstanding, you get a target on your back. Once you say, I'm a feminist, like, okay, it's on. I just want to hear from you. Maybe we could start with you, Janet, and bring it back this side. Why do you think it is so polarizing?
I think it's to do with power and privilege, and it's not to throw those words around. But when you really look at it, the attention or focus on lifting women and girls is an affront to the power that some people feel that they're losing. And then I think it spiraled. It really did. We were talking earlier in the room. You said something very interesting about, male content creators and maybe just messaging that started holding a truth that may not be true. So why do I think it's polarizing? I think it's just to do with power and a feeling that you're reducing me to the other and not the priority. You're saying women and girls deserve equal rights. You'll bring the whataboutisms because you're like, I didn't hear my name in that equation. I didn't hear my gender in that equation. So you're locking me out. It's like, no, everyone deserves equal rights. But statistically, there's still a lot of women and girls who are marginalized, who are left behind. It's not discounting that men aren't. And it's like, no, but what about? I also think there's genuinely a big anti-gender narrative that's happening globally. As women are coming into their own, it's making quite a number of people uncomfortable. Agency. We were sold a scam for a long time about our abilities and limitations. And then we woke up and said, actually, we can. And some of us are living in exploring possibilities beyond our wildest dreams. And then you realize that doesn't sit well because the message was, you belong somewhere. I've answered your question. There's a problem with giving journalists a microphone. Rein me in, Adele. Just be like, okay.
She's like, turn it off, turn her mic off. No, I would never do that. You've made so much sense. And it is subtle, even if you think about advertising and like, who would always be in the adverts as the CEO and who would be in the adverts cooking. Those are subtle, but you see it every day. Another thing that I think causes the misconception as we get to you, Evelyne, is many people reduce the fight for women's rights and the conversation on feminism away from issues to do with, let's say, health, away to do with issues that are actually life or death for very many women and very many girls on the continent. I think first to appreciate the whole concept of feminism and the origin was really in the Western countries. It's world, so to speak. And so that came with its baggage. At the onset of it, the focus was on the pertinent issues for the Western countries. Over time, that has changed. And we've seen many variations of feminism. We have Afrofeminism that is now looking at what is our context. What are the issues that are important to us, which are not necessarily the issues that, the women in the West are struggling with? If you look at, for example, economic empowerment, feminism speaks to some of the concerns. For example, the burden of care within the home setting. Women are often the ones that are providing care, support to the sick, to the children. And this, takes away some of the opportunities. So, for example, a number of women will not pursue employment because she has to take care of her mother or her mother-in-law. But even when women are in employment, formal employment, there are all these issues like, equal pay. You will not get. You'll do equal work, but you'll not get equal pay. You want to rise up the ladder. If you're working in a setup that's not only women, there's a problem there, how you rise up the ladder. There's also a problem of, even just getting full maternity care in certain countries. That's a huge problem. Our reproductive health as women. And that's the one thing that distinguishes us from men, our reproductive capacity. And yet, a woman wants to be able to space her children so that she's able to develop. She can take care of them, but access to contraceptives is a problem. Access to information for our girls who are already sexually active, that is a problem. Access to abortion is a problem. So women are ending up with unsafe abortion. So this whole concept is problematic. And when we talk about feminism, it's, looking at the whole life cycle of the woman. And we were talking earlier about menopause. That's a subject that's dear to a lot of us. Our
doctors, our providers don't even tell us what the issues are. You will continuously visit. Nobody will give you the medication. You are dying. You can't sleep. It's a hot flash. It's all this range that nobody talks about. And there's a lot of stigma. As you age up and when you talk about menopause, nobody wants to talk about it. You don't have the information. The provider is not providing. You are at a loss.
I love how you break it down, because I think even a woman who has never seen herself speaking about feminism has spoken about some of the issues that you've talked about, or is suffering because of some of the gaps in the issues that you've talked about, but because of the misunderstanding of what feminism means, Afrofeminism, then you don't understand how it pertains to you, even as an African woman. I want to hear from you, Norah, about where we are at now. Maybe you could look at it as Kenya and as a continent in terms of what are the ways in which we're seeing gaps for women, taking it back to feminism and health. Because I recently I read something that we're finding more cases of adult ADHD in women now, because the research in the 70s only looked at men, and ADHD manifests very differently in women. And culturally, women were told to just suck up the symptoms. And now in adulthood, you can no longer do that. And they're like, oh, hang on, this might be the ADHD thing. So even in research, right, just like status, where are we at?
Well, I think we are making progress. We are not there yet. Talking of research, I was also looking at something that was talking about, the research on painkillers and pain management. It was it was all done on men. There were male researchers. Naturally, you'll just work on what you know. But I was really upset because even the testing, the mice were all male.
Mice were male.
Yeah. Like you didn't even consider looking at the female mice, like with all the issues, they're going to get pregnant, they're going to give birth, they're going to be in so much pain. I'm wondering, like, which pain is this male mouse experiencing so as to deserve testing of this pain management? Anyway, it comes from that way back where everything was designed with men in mind. And whether it's the research, whether it's the workplace, it was all designed with men in mind, because women were at home, they are nurturers, they were taking care of children, making sure the man is ready to go to work and come back and sleep. And, that was the role. So we didn't have that. And so right now, I'm excited. Yes, there's progress we are making in terms of ensuring women are represented in leadership spaces, in the health sector. I mean, of course, usual same data, 70% of the health workforce are women, still only 25% are getting to senior leadership and C-suites. What are the problems, the balance around home and work? Because somehow you're still supposed to be this superwoman who can still take care of the home and do the work. But work, you're expected to excel. Yes. When you get to your appraisal, you're not being appraised on your performance. No, you are aggressive. You talked in this way. Most of the time, that is the appraisal for women. Yet, they're just exhibiting the same behaviors. But men are considered being assertive, risk takers, all that kind of stuff. We need that level playing field. There's still a lot more. There's issues of sexual harassment, even based on our research. Sexual harassment and gender discrimination in the workplace is still big. Women are facing that. You want to a promotion? Let's meet in this restaurant or this hotel at 9 a.m. You're doing your PhD. You want to meet your supervisor? I'm sorry to say, most of the time they're male. Come over to Nakuru, 9 o'clock. What is expected to happen there? And so you'll find women are pursuing your PhD, but the dropouts for PhD are so much more among the women than the men, because you're trying to juggle so much more and you're having so many barriers being put ahead of you before you get there. So it's all the things that we're getting to see in the schools, in the workplace, where we also don't have role models. Unfortunately, when we were young, the maths teacher was male, the science teacher was male. So you're like, am I going to be that? But the nurse and the home science was the woman. So that's where you limited your, like where you're going to go. Having male allies, similarly, senior women allies, because we also find senior women who had not a very good experience getting where they were, do not know any other way So they just feel like you gotta go through exactly the pain that I went through to get to this space. But we can be better. We can make a better space for all of us.
One thing I want to do is maybe Wambari could help me have a mic. I'm going to break the rules and just have the mic in the audience, because I want to hear, when was the first time you acknowledged that you are a feminist? And did you know that was what was happening?
Thank you, Adele. So I feel, and also listening to a lot of the stories and knowing, yourself, Janet, and hearing your story, I think it's how you're brought up. So I didn't realize that I'm a feminist until the term became maybe popular. And that's when I could say, oh, that's what I am, because I do believe in equality. However, I still couldn't step into that because there was a fear around it, right? And despite me being very outspoken for all of my media career, and there still wasn't a fit to being a feminist, because I believed, because I didn't do my research, being a feminist meant that I hated men. And I was like, but I don't hate men. But now I've understood, because again, we're not taught these things in school. And I think we should be. What is a feminist? It's about equality.
I love, it's come up in the video, thank you, you've said it and we've heard it, that many people feared being termed feminist publicly because it meant you hated men. So we'll start with you, Norah. Do you feel like in this fight for women's rights and for the rights of girls that men are needed? And can they be feminists?
Yes, men are needed. We are in an ecosystem. We exist together. We need the men. We need to speak to the men, because when you're at a point of power and privilege, letting go is very hard. It's nice to always be, the king, like on top of it all, getting all the benefits. You get to eat the best parts of the chicken, the best part of the fish, At the end of the day, we need to be speaking to each other. We need to make feminism, bring the men on, because sometimes I want to challenge the men to look at, would they want equal opportunity for their wife, for their daughter, or for their mother? We need to rope in men as male allies. I like to call it male allies, because there's a comfort with that, because we've had a few men speaking to, when I stand for a woman, then I'll be accused of sexual relations in the office if I stand and amplify this woman's voice. Or it means that I have been kaliwad on. That's what they say. Like a woman has overpowered you, so you're definitely not man. But I believe if men are roped in, we cannot have an echo chamber. Yes, we speak to each other, but men need to be roped in. We can call it feminism, pro-feminist, we can use other terms, but it is still the same thing. Rights. We all need to have that equal access to rights and opportunities.
I'm just going to be 100% honest. When I joined X or Twitter, right? It was such a wonderful space for feminists on the continent to connect and learn about what were they doing in South Africa to end GBV. I remember Ghana and just learning what has worked there. Okay, fine. Let's also try implement it this side. Or even terminology, I remember a lot of Kenyan feminists even teaching me terminology and what does this mean, etc. Obviously, it is not the same space anymore. But at that time, I did a lot of work of educating men who didn't understand. And I realized what's difficult, and I had to extend grace to myself, is that it started to feel like I am teaching you how to see me as a human. And then I didn't know how not to take that personally. However, I do understand the importance of that. I want to bring in Evelyne and Janet still on this, having men as feminists. What are your thoughts on that, keeping in mind it's a patriarchal society?
I want to first start by acknowledging that there are a number of men that fight for women's rights and opportunities. And in Kenya, if I could just name a few, Dr. Gitahi of AMREF has been in panels where it's only men and they're talking about women, and he's walked out.
Yeah.
That's a show of solidarity.
Yeah.
We have Professor Sur. We have many.
I think I've also been in the space. I think I started a little bit maybe naive, and I'm like, oh, I know we're all in this together. Then over time is when I started to see, when you asked, when did you realize you're a feminist. I remember it was when we ran the story called Periods of Shame, and I was in the newsroom, and a lot of us female journalists, it really struck us. You were like, this is when you know you're privileged, because you didn't know that there's people who don't have access to sanitary products. And then when I started to talk about it, just to mainstream and keep the conversation going, because the feedback was massive, and it was genuinely, a lot of us were just baffled at the fact that there's girls using goat hide and chicken feathers. We were like, in which Kenya? They were like, oh, you do advocacy. I'm like, I didn't know that's what it's called. Oh, you're a feminist. I didn't know that's what it's called. And then with men also, I was like, it's a no-brainer. I know you're on our side. Yeah. How can you not see us as equal? And then perhaps even being in a relationship where for the longest time it's like your shine is stifled. It's like I don't get to be Mr. So-and-so.
Yeah.
So things like that begin to show you, oh, we have a very different understanding of what it means to hold each other in equal regard. Sometimes it almost made me want to edit myself down, and I had to grapple. So what am I grappling with now after trying to kind of heal and navigate all of those things that I was confronted with, is making the language and the words comfortable to then invite men in. But I grapple with it. It's like the same thing you said. I have to teach you how to see me. So I'm trying to hold space for those two truths, to say, okay, misogyny, patriarchy makes you shut down. You've already abused me, insulted me, and put me in a box with all other men, and I'm not bad. And we say, but we know you're not all bad, but these are things that exist. Why is there child marriage, FGM? It's got a lot of issues around culture, but the gatekeepers of those communities are men a lot of the time. But also women are cutters. Yes, they are. But who is their superior there? So I grapple with it. So now I'm trying to figure out, to Norah's point, meninist, pro-feminist, will we then have to keep editing? Or do we just get to a point where empathy, truth, and holding space to hear feedback?
So we'll have the roaming mic. If anybody has any questions.
Hello, thank you so much for this conversation. It's very empowering. My question to you, as women who are very conscious, especially in matters pertaining feminism, where do you think, or how do you think it became that there were some females who were toxic when it comes to feminism? Because I was thinking about the question Adele asked, like, when did you realize you're a feminist? And I think that's the time I realized I was a feminist, because I was like, this is not who I am, and they are making me be ashamed of who I am, because being a feminist is not attacking males or just being like negative and toxic. And the truth is, there are still those type of feminists. So I'm wondering, like, where are they from, or what is confusing them, and how can we navigate conversations, especially online, when we are in the same room and we're supposed to be the same team, but I feel like we are not.
I think one of the things could be down to expression. Feminists and people who push for rights express themselves differently. And I think I'm answering part of the question. I'm still formulating. I think feminist activists who really broke down a lot of the molds so that a lot of us could, they say you walk so that somebody can run. And some of the time it was really vocal and powerful. And I think it was words that shook people. And I think it was easy to then say, these people are harmful and loud and abrasive and aggressive, and you all want to be like that? Is that what feminist is? She's toxic. Without realizing, number one, it's okay. Anger is not a sin. It's okay for me to have been angry and express something. But number two, it's also denying the fact that feminists express themselves in so many different ways, in their art, in just how they show up as a mom. But there's this connotation that a feminist just looks and sounds a certain way, and therefore all feminists look and sound a certain way. And therefore, if the moment you say I'm a feminist, you're saying in their mind, you're loud, you're aggressive, and you're anti-male, simply because I was saying, but women deserve to vote. Women deserve equal pay. All the things that sound like you're saying, take something away from the men so that you want equal pay. Your next thing that you're going to do is ask for more money. It's almost like you don't have a limit for what you want, you guys. And you're so loud and annoying. Number one, it's okay if I'm loud. It's okay for me to express myself the way I feel is important. Don't diminish me just because I shouted. It's fine. My anger is valid. But at the same time, don't undermine the fact that we express ourselves in so many different ways. I had to make that piece, by the way, not too long ago. I was like, yeah, sometimes I'm fired up. Sometimes feminism is also radical self-love. Sometimes it's saying something. Sometimes it's posting it. Sometimes it's joining a panel with Adele and Norah and Evelyne. There's so many different ways to express a message. I think that connotation is because it's just been pigeonholed. And pigeonholing is easy because it makes it easy for you to use an example that gains momentum and popularity and be like, that's the bad egg. You want to be a bad egg? Be like that chick.
Thank you. Dr. Masika, I'm one of the WomenLift Health recent graduates. And I like the question that you asked about when is the first time you realize you're a feminist. And just thinking about it for a very long time, I didn't want to associate myself with the word, feminism, with the movement, and that got me thinking because, I'm a thinker. And why do I not want to associate myself with something that should be positive? And at the end of it, I realized it's because the feminism that is socialized, that is marketed, and like Evelyne said, it's a concept that originated from the West. And I would ask all of you, can you say feminism in your language, in your tribe? Do we have it? Because the concept itself is very foreign for the African context, but it doesn't mean it didn't exist. Was Africa hopeless before feminism as a concept was brought into Africa? And I keep saying, when you think about feminism, we need to think about pre-colonial Africa, colonial Africa, and post-colonial. So most of the conversation really focuses on post-colonial Africa without looking back at those periods that really shaped Africa to what Africa is. And Africa is a very unique continent because we were colonized twice, more than any other continent in the world. And meaning our ideologies, our values, our culture, our community perspective has been really shaped by very many different things. But then, like I said, was Africa hopeless before the term feminism was craved out? No. We lived in a society that was progressive, that had, and most of the time when we talk about pre-colonial Africa or even colonial Africa, we think of, the Nyinga from Angola who led Angola to fight against colonialism. We really just talk about war, but there's so many dimensions to the feminism that we should understand and we should push in Africa, because the Western feminism does not work for African systems and African contexts. And that's why a lot of people, men and women, grapple with the association with the word feminism. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't hit home. It's not what we know. Feminism in the Western concept, the independence thing that it's sung about and we talk about, in the Western concept is about individualism. But Africa is about community. Africa is about togetherness. Africa, before our leaders were corrupt, you wouldn't find one single extremely wealthy person in Africa, because everything was shared. Land was communal, food was communal, everything was about community. So if we want to make any changes, my perspective, thinking from a technical or professional perspective, and we need to message what this is, this equality that we are talking about, in a way that is more understandable to majority of Africans. 80% of Africans live in rural areas. The 20% are the only ones who can sit in boards as we know it. They can be CEOs, they can travel to and sit in the UN, but majority of Africans are in rural settings who have cultures. And culture is part of Africa. What is the role of culture? Where do we place culture in feminism as we want to describe it? Because when we want to talk about African feminism, culture has to be center of it. The Baganda community that the women kneel in front of their men, does that mean these women are belittled? It is their culture. So how do we push African feminism in a way that resonates with our context, our cultural values, our community perspective? Because at the end of the day, for any change to happen, it needs to happen within the current system that we are in. The system in the West is so different from the system in Africa. So this language, when you go to parliament and talk about pads, I know it's been talked about, very few men who are in this system will want to listen to you. But when you go to parliament and talk about agriculture and livestock that is empowering 70% of the women in the village, they will listen to you because there's an indirect, and to you this should be a win. This is an indirect benefit to the women that you're fighting for, to the equality that you're fighting for. So at the end of the day, the language matters. If feminism is a word that has a sour taste in the mouth, come up with something else, but make it context specific. Look at the cultural perspective, look at the community values, because at the end of the day, this is our system, our African system, not the Western system.
I really love that. I really love that. And even when you asked about the Baganda women, the first thought I had is I can't answer on their behalf, which is why representation is so important. I can't speak for a cultural context that may not be my lived reality, but I want the space to be fleshy enough for them to be represented as well. And I think there's also the aspect in listening more, you get to understand what was working from the women who were participating and what looked like it was working. So what are you comfortable with? And I also like you talking about culture is made by people. And so culture can evolve. I feel like the reason it needs to evolve is because the context is evolving. And then you can see issues of access being ripe in certain contexts, right? So it's like, okay, so what is the audit here? But are they things that were working in our culture? Absolutely. Sometimes I think even some of our political issues are because we inherited a structure that may not really work for us. Not to excuse the bad governance, but it's something I think about. I'm like, maybe this thing, it's not ours, you know? And so those are incredible points you brought up. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to them, but that was incredible. Thank you, Dr. Masika.
I'm loving this conversation, first of all. There's so many snippets of pieces that have been said of what I want to ask or bring a conversation around. When you spoke about feminism being a journey, it made me think of the fact that in the 70s is when a woman could get a bank card without a man. Just the other day, the 70s is not Kitambo. You know, it's not, you know, you might think 30 years ago is the 70s. It's not, but it's still just the other day. It's not that long ago, right? Conversations around inheritance of land, women being able to inherit from fathers is still a conversation currently ongoing, where you'll go home and your father will say things like, you know, this is my son's home, but you're the firstborn girl. And you're like, excuse me, it's a journey. It's a journey of where we are moving to. When you are speaking about speaking to different women in different spaces and having to also remove yourself from how you're feeling to listen to a woman's situation. When you spoke about toxic femininity, now that's what I want to bring it to. Sometimes when we speaking about feminism, the call is coming from inside the house, because you'll find that women began attacking women and calling it feminism. In that, a woman will say, me, I think you should serve a man when he's your man. You're like, that doesn't seem very feminist to me. So where is the connotation that feminism is not serving, or feminism is not this? They became this idea of what it was supposed to be. And I think when Janet was speaking about the fact that when a fight was being had in the initial stages, there was anger. And fully understandable. When you're breaking glass ceilings, sometimes you have to be punching it, because it's not going to crack because you hit it with your finger. You have to punch it, which is fully understandable. But now, in the context of where we are at this day and age, we have a conversation happening on social media called "Pick Me, Pick Misha," which is where a lot of because it's young girl conversations that are being had, when a person who does not live in the feminism that you believe in, but is more I don't even know how to define it really. She's maybe pro-traditional femininity. She's a pick-misha. She's a pick-me. And yes, there are some women who will advocate for very incendiary statements that men make, especially sometimes men with microphones, that will make statements that are against women, that are actually misogynistic statements, and women will support that. But sometimes when you said that it's based on where a woman is from, when a woman comes and tells you, FGM is not that bad, you're coming to speak about our truth. To her, it has been fed into her for time immemorial. So that's her reality. So when I say the call is coming from inside the house, we have to also remind ourselves that when I'm speaking to a woman whose her lived experience is different from mine, I also have the responsibility of speaking to her with a kindness, of educating her. Her experience can be, she might think that if a woman comes and says that I want to stay home, like even when we speak about women staying home and taking care of children, it's very recent that it became something that we all, even women, salute. Because we'd be like, but a woman is a woman who's a CEO. You know, we're out here trying to do all these things. But the woman who's being a teacher, a mother, a nurse, all day from morning to evening is still a vital woman in society, isn't it? So I feel like that conversation also, especially in a space where that, you're going to broadcast this and people are going to have this conversation. When you're behind that laptop and a woman is speaking something out there into the internet sphere, that we might be also hold space for these women, right? And not be that a woman has to be a particular thing to be a feminist. I think it's supposed to be inclusive, and we need to be inclusive from inside the house.
I think what I'm also getting is that the kindness we have to extend not only to ourselves, but to others, and that will help people introspect, women introspect and find their form of feminism. That's choice. Yeah, choice with knowledge. Exactly. But I want to thank you first, you amazing panelists, for coming and spending your time with us and being so giving of your knowledge and for the work you do. In the moments it doesn't feel like you're making any impact or it's like you're hitting your head against a wall, please always remember that the work you do matters, even in the moments when it's like almost depleting you. And then thank you to all of you wonderful people who came, our pro-feminists, and we'll talk about the term menace, ally. Thank you so much for coming and being so open with your opinions. And I think this was a space where all types of Afrofeminism was allowed to exist. Like there was no wrong, which is just so wonderful. And lastly, thank you to you for watching or listening to this episode of Legally Clueless. Happy International Women's Day, first and foremost. For more resources, if you're trying to understand feminism, or you want to join the Legally Clueless family, or you want to understand more of what WomenLift Health do, you can check out the description, and there's a lot of resources for you to read up on then. That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.